Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. For the last year or so, I've been trying to untangle what it is that I'm trying to do with these videos and the writings on my website and my newsletter. If you just take a quick glance at my YouTube channel here, you'll see a wide variety of things, everything from traveling the world to skydiving to the books that I'm reading to random things that I'm curious about. But what is the underlying thing that holds it all together? I'm learning that it's simply this: following the curiosity thread and seeing what I find. I've always been insatiably curious, particularly around things that are unusual and bizarre and the human experience. This has led me deep down the rabbit hole of what is curiosity to begin with and why does it even matter? We're often told pat phrases like curiosity killed the cat, which I just think that's ridiculous. If you actually stop and think about it, that if humans were not curious, we would probably still be hunkered around a campfire living the hunter-gatherer life or something. But because people were curious, asked questions, tried new things, all kinds of interesting and astounding things has been done by the human race. And this is a fascinating concept from this book that I recently finished called Failure: Why Science is Successful, which it's worth reading. But his point is essentially that scientific discoveries usually start with someone saying, "Oh, that's unusual. I should look into that," or "I wonder why that is the way that it is." I would say my parents and grandfather are the people who really instilled this into me, particularly my grandfather. He was really good with his hands and was always inventing something new or trying something different. It was like every time we would go visit him, he would have some new project that he had conjured up in his workshop. I mean, like the one time he literally built an elevator out of a forklift. Like, how does that even work? I don't know. He just said, "Oh, what if we would try this?" And that leads to all kinds of creative and innovative solutions to problems that we probably wouldn't have if we weren't willing to ask that question and be curious and say, what if we tried this thing? Oh, that could be interesting. I recently read the quote that curiosity is essentially an attitude towards living. That's from the book Beyond Wealth. I'll link it below. But that really stuck with me. It's something that we cultivate and develop and we nurture in our lives. It's a mindset to try something new, to not be afraid to ask questions. You know, the future is latent with potential. Almost anything can happen there, which is so exciting. But my question would be, how do we tap into that future potential if we aren't first curious and willing to ask those questions and try new things and innovate and discover things that are new or things that we don't understand yet? In addition, being a curious person makes you way more interesting to be around. And this is something, again, that I've really enjoyed. I have certain friends in my life that every time I see them, I'll come away from the conversation having learned something new. I think we all have someone like that in our lives where we encounter them and they're just overflowing with interesting things that they've learned that they want to share with you. So sure, being a curious person isn't always very utilitarian, but at the same time, isn't it kind of fun to have random curious bits of information, something unusual that many people may not have heard of? One of the favorite ones for me is, Pepsi, the soda company, once owned one of the largest navies in the world. It's a totally wild story that I love to tell people. Or there's another one during World War II where some guy invented a precision-guided missile. The interesting part being the precision-guided piece was a pigeon inside the warhead pecking on a screen, and that's what guided the missile. Like, totally wild, interesting things that I'm not sure if they really serve any real purpose, but it does add that little spice to life. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this concept of first principles. Basically, how do we strip down the basics of how the world works and what makes things the way they are, so to speak. And I think this is extremely important. And to try to even ask those questions, you naturally have to be curious and willing to say, I don't really understand how this works, but it's important for me to try to understand it. I think it's really important that we have a good understanding of how we got here, historically, culturally, as a civilization, and perhaps where are we going? What are the questions we should be asking? This is important things to keep in mind. And this brings me right back to, why am I a curious person? It's because I want to understand how the world works. Why does it function the way that it does? Why do people make the decisions that they do? What were the things that had to happen in history for us to arrive at this moment? And why does that matter? And what can we learn from it? Lately, I've been just fascinated with mosaics. Last year, we were in Italy and got to see some really early mosaics in some churches there. And if you look at a mosaic and you only look at a small piece of it, or even a chunk, it usually doesn't make any sense. But when you step back and look at the whole, suddenly you get the whole picture. And I like to think of knowledge in the same way. When you have these little bits and pieces, it sometimes doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but the more pieces you gather, it becomes this intricate and amazing mosaic that helps us understand and build a framework for the world and how things function. And, I need to be careful that it doesn't sound too lofty and that, of course, I can figure out how everything all works. Of course not. That's something I'll never be able to figure out on my own because the world is just a very complicated place. But the more bits and pieces you can add to the mosaic, hopefully a more complete picture you can get, a better understanding you can have of the world around you. And it's important because every piece you add is a chunk to your mosaic, but the next person's mosaic may look very different because they may be getting other bits of information or looking at that piece of information from a very different angle. And once we can try to add more pieces, the more we understand how little we know, and it keeps us humble and wants us to learn more and gives us this idea that when I meet someone new, I have this feeling that there's always something they can teach me. There's certainly something or a perspective or a piece of information that they have that they could teach me that I don't have. And that's a way of keeping us humble. So at its core, being curious is just simply a mindset of being willing to learn new things, to innovate, to try to understand things. Over the years, I've had the honor of working with a number of nonprofits, particularly working in war-torn areas and with refugees. And one thing that really sticks out to me every time is how important education and learning is for people who have lost so much. And getting those tools for them to rebuild their lives is so important. And it just becomes so clear to me how important knowledge and education is to building a better future, to, yes, we can't fix the past, but hopefully make it better for the next generation. As we age, it's very easy to lose the childlike wonder that we all once had that made us want to go around and ask why about everything. How does that work? Why? What about this? What about that? And we should never lose that. I think it would do us good to regain some of that childlike wonder, to be humble enough to ask questions, to admit that we don't understand something, to be curious about the world around us and the people around us and the cultures and the languages and all the things that are out there for us to learn. A question that's asked honestly is never dumb. So go out there, ask questions, learn something new every day, stay curious. If you found this video interesting, you should consider subscribing to my newsletter where I really dive into this a lot. Basically, every issue is me exploring a new thread of curiosity and seeing where it takes me. So you can subscribe to that down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.